Session 87 of the Law of One. Let's talk here about the negative polarity. Let's begin. Alright, we got the session 87, and this is probably going to be a 3-part session because of how long it is. We have about 28 questions to cover. And the beginning of this session is going to be dedicated, probably half of this session is all about negative entities, perhaps even more. I don't remember. But we're definitely going to cover a lot about negative entities and, of course, negative polarity. And this is a topic that is interesting, especially for those on the positive path who can understand a lot more themselves via describing that which is not, that which is the ego, that which is the separate self. And so I find that it's a helpful conversation. So we have a couple of golden nuggets to discuss here. And I don't have any particular introduction to make. No refreshers, nothing. Of course, we're going to go through some personal questions, contact maintenance, and so on at the beginning. So let's get those out of the way and start talking about negative entities and negative polarity. Let's get very negative here. First question is, as usual, Don says, first, please give me the condition of the instrument. And Ra says, the distortions of the physical complex are unchanged. The vital energy levels are greatly enhanced. So, in essence, the physical complex remains the same, and her vital energy levels are improving a lot. This is due to a lot of what they had been doing and making Carla a lot more viable for the contact in terms of just the activities that she performed and so on. So that's it. I don't want to spend much time here. Next question. Don says, thank you. In considering what was mentioned in the last session about the sensor, I have thought about the fact that the position of the origin of the smoke changes approximately 6 inches horizontally. Would it be better to have a sensor in a single horizontal smoking position? Ross says this alteration would be a helpful one given that the sensor is virgin. It always catches me that Rod uses that old archaic unhelpful one instead of a helpful one. Alright, so this is conversation about, we'll keep talking about this because the questions are related to it. But these are simple questions about the position of the censer, the Bible, and the chalice. Was it? And these were suggested. I didn't read this question in the end of last session because it's all about maintenance, but they would sometimes make some suggestions as to how to put the appurtenances, as they call them. Now, a little bit of lore here, or trivia, you might say. Ross sometimes would suggest that they would guard the alignments of the appurtenances, and they concluded after a while, I don't know how long it took them, probably after the contact, that what Ra was referring to was to align the questions, not really the physical things, because they didn't have such an impact. But I think here they might be referring, or in the last session they were referring to fixing a little bit the sensor because there was incense burning, and maybe the smoke, the way the smoke was flowing, was affecting Carla's body or the energy field or something. I'm not sure. But this might not be the type of alignment that Ra was talking about usually when they suggested to align the appurtenances and so on, or to guard carefully the alignments. But that's just my speculation. Okay. Question 3. Don says, what would be the optimum geometrical arrangement of censer, chalice, and candle with respect to Bible and table and the positions we now have them in? Ra says, both chalice and candle occupy the optimal configuration with respect to the book, most closely aligned with the law of one in the distortion complexes of this instrument. It is optimal to have the censer to the rear of this book and centered at the spine of its configuration. So, okay. So this is, when they talk about the Bible, they refer to it as the book most closely aligned with the law of one in terms of Carla. So, this may be read as the Bible is the text most closely aligned with the law of one. That's not so. No text actually is. In my opinion, I think all texts are just texts. They have nothing to do with the law of one, including the raw material. Surprise. Gabe said this. Yeah, I mean, it's all texts. Anybody can read this and say, I have no idea what this is saying. But if you're seeking, then you will find even in Alice of Wonderland, right? Or whatever other book you read, you're going to find the law of one, because the law of one is everything. That's what I meant. But in any case, I'm just making this, I'm clarifying this because it may sound like the Bible is the most closely aligned with the law of one, but they say in the distortion complexes of this instrument. So in her preferences, she found the law of one more closely aligned with this. And if I remember correctly, this is the New Testament. So it's all about Jesus, where we have the benevolent God, not the negative one that is on and off in the Old Testament. So okay, it's all about configurations and things like that. So Don says, would a position directly between the chalice and the candle be optimum then for the censer? And Ra says, this is not an exact measurement, since both chalice and candle are irregularly shaped. However, speaking roughly, this is correct. This little camera. Okay, so again, this is all just measurements and how to place. I'm just gonna keep going. This doesn't make anything useful for us. Then Don is asking now, here's where we begin the conversation. Don says, thank you. What is the present situation with respect to our fifth density negative companion? And Ra says, this entity has withdrawn for a period of restoration of its polarity. So here we're going to enter the dynamic of negative influences and how these influences, which we call entities, and in a way they are these strong influences that we call we call them demons, or depending on the mythology that we use, we're going to call them something. But they are as real as anything else, meaning that they are a thought complex that has been reinforced over and over and stronger over time, and so it has this pull on the mind. And the way Ra describes this dynamic is that as it approaches the capacity to influence the entity, in this case this group, then it wants to gain polarity. It wants to it wants to reinforce itself. And this is done through the process that we're going to talk about here, which is the whole system of the negative social memory complex and manipulation, temptations, and so on. But that's the point. The negative entity wants to increase its polarity by ways of deviating, manipulating, and controlling others, or so-called others, the creation in general. And so when it doesn't find this, it loses polarity. So that's why Ra is saying that it has left for a period of restoration of its polarity, because it's not finding anything there. And so it's losing polarity. So it needs to go and gain more polarity. It's a beautiful dynamic of how the universe works. But all right, let's get into more deep questions here. Question 6, Don says, would you expand upon the concept of the acquisition of polarity by this particular entity and its use? Specifically, of this polarity other than with the simple, obvious need for 6th density harvest, if this is possible, please. Ra explains, we would, meaning that they will give an expansion on this, and say the nature of the densities above your own is that a purpose may be said to be shared by both positive and negative polarities. This purpose is the acquisition of the ability to welcome more and more the less and less distorted love light and light love of the one infinite creator. So I want to give a little bit of a visualization. The universe can be seen as just one mind, and this is why I often say that entities do not exist per se as independent agents of reality. That's just an illusion. Just like you might delude yourself to think that there is an independent thought from yourself, and indeed we can actually do this. We have the capacity, the imagination to do this and say, well, my thoughts are independent from me. This is not true, obviously. All thoughts arise and subside in the mind, and so all entities arise and subside within the cosmic mind. Yes? So if you see this, and you will see dynamics within the cosmic mind play between positive and negative. Just like you see in your mind, there is a dichotomy and there is cognitive dissonance, all play in this this game of positive and negative, of yes and no, and polarity, basically. So that's the premise of reality. The whole creation is based on ones and zeros, and it's a binary system, of course. This is why the theory of simulated reality, this all being a simulation, gains a lot of weight, because yes, we can measure everything in terms of, is it there or is it not? We have space and we have objects. We have energy and we have a vacuum. So we can play this. That's the playground. So when we talk about positive negatives in terms of metaphysical pool in consciousness, then we see what the influences are to believe or to know, because the negative path is one of belief, the positive one is one of knowing. And if you get this, then you start seeing the whole point of reality and what the positive and negatives are. So Ra is describing the nature of the densities above third density, of course, and they say that the purpose is shared by both positive and negative, and that is to allow the most amount of light, right? Love, light, light, love, to make this a bit more viable to our visualization or to our practical means. I see love, light, and light, love as that energy or information that moves through the mind, which is intelligent energy. And so the acquisition and ability to welcome more, and I would add here that to use as well, that is the purpose. That is the purpose of positive and negatives. Now, of course, the negatives use it for control, domination, and manipulation, and so on, whereas the positive one uses it for inspiration and joy and just, happy that we're alive. No fear, none of that. And that's the point. It's to use that intelligent energy that flows through the mind for those purposes. Okay. Let's read what else does Ra say. They say, upon the negative path, the wisdom density is one in which power over others has been refined until it is approaching absolute power. Any force, such as the force your group and those of Ra offer, which cannot be controlled by the power of such a negative fifth density mind-body-spirit complex, then depolarizes the entity which has not controlled other selves. So it's interesting. I'm going to speculate something totally off, so just off the record. I just thought it was interesting that Ra says the negative fifth density mind-body-spirit complex. Why is it a complex still after third density? I can only speculate that that's because, and I may be off, I think they might refer to the positive ones as well as mind-body-spirit complex. So this whole minute may be deleted from your mind. But I just think that it might be because they maintain a sort of veil, a separation still between conscious mind and the unconscious mind, matrix and potentiator. But never mind that. Okay, so Ra is saying that the negative path is one that has been refined its power to the maximum degree, meaning that it needs to have full control to feel that it's doing something, right? And this is through the manipulation of others. So it gets, we have a very blatant example here in humanity with these systems of control, which is what has been created. We have a very negative oriented system. That's why we call it the matrix. And so we have these depictions of reality being controlled by negative beings and so on. This is quite true, because the reigning and dominant philosophy of life here has been be competitive, control and manipulate all the variables to your benefit and so on. So it's a very negative oriented society. We know that, or system. I wouldn't call it a society. The society is made out of people, and people are not naturally negative. There are many, but among the vast majority of us, there are very few. And this is something that I see from my own experience. I have only met a certain amount of people in my life, and I don't think I've ever met a truly negative one. Confused? Yes, many people confused. People that I even call psychopaths. In the past, I just see that they are very confused, because I see there's still some glimpses, many glimpses of love and trying to be of help. But yeah, there are others who are very negative, and so that's what they want. Just like Ross says here, they want absolute power. So I don't think we actually meet these people anymore. They're not really out there in the public eye. They remain controlling those who seem to be the most negative ones. So if you think this is control and power, it might not be so. Okay, any force such as the force your group and those of Ra offer really can be controlled by the negative entity, and so it depolarizes it because it can control other selves. This makes sense. That which is first of all, Ra's social memory complex cannot be controlled by a fifth density negative, and so this group, which is really who takes the merit, being Carla, Don, and Jim, they are the ones who maintain, they stood up to the task, and they weren't influenced by it. So we know this from the previous sessions and all the things that Ra suggested over and over again, just Maintain this harmony. This harmony is what's maintaining the contact. Everything else is just ancillary. It's not really crucial. It's just the love and harmony that they had. Once that was broken, then the contact started to deteriorate, as we know. Okay. Ra finishes and says, "It is not within your conscious selves to stand against such refined power, but rather it has been through the harmony, the mutual love, and the honest calling for aid from the forces of light which have given you the shield and buckler." So I swear that I didn't know this was the last paragraph, and that's what I just talked about. So I think there is a lesson here for us to recapitulate, because we know it. We just, sometimes we just, not that we forget it, but we cover it with other types of interest and attention. Yeah, there's something to be said here, especially for those seekers, those intrepid seekers who want to enter the realms of interdimensional beings and positive and negatives and angels and demons and so on. I think a lot of people who enter this are trying to play with fire. And please, I have the least amount of interest in creating some sort of warning or cautiousness. I'm just talking from my experience of what I see and what seems logical to me, especially based on what Ross says here. Ross says, "It is not within your conscious selves to stand against such refined power," to basically stand against the influences, the deep influences of the negative and even the positive ones. Try to understand positive messages. It is not within our conscious attention. We are not, this experience is not, that's why Ra says, this is not the density of understanding. You're not here to understand, you're here to be. And it is almost like the bark of a tree is not there to provide anything. It's just there to provide the external surface of the tree. All the intricate parts of the tree are inside and needs not to worry about funneling water up and trying to get the minerals necessary and to do photosynthesis and so on. All of this is not within the bark of the tree. It's the outside of the tree. So when we go deep inside, we see all these workings and we see everything that is. And so we have two things only to do. There's a choice to be made. You either want to control all of this that's happening, that which is my mind. I want to control my mind. That's the negative side. And then there is the positive one, which says, I am not here. I'm just perceiving all of this. This is just what is. And, I have no way to judge myself good or bad. This is the non-dual perspective of reality. And, this is acceptance. This is love and understanding in the sense of understanding other beings or accepting other beings. I use both interchangeably, understanding and accepting. In this context, at least. So, it is not for us, for our conscious selves, our conscious minds, to be dealing with this power. And so I see that some people get into these realms, and you see, I'm only speaking strictly from the point of view of awakening and living from that awakening. That I can say with almost total conviction, that if you're in this path of self-awareness and living from there, these are distractions. These will take you off on a tangent, because positive or negatives, they're there to create a sort of influence in you for you to be, but not to become so involved. And this is why you see the in metaphysics, you see that the positive ones are always saying, stop, looking, go inside. These are all the good channelings, or I say good not in the way of positive or negative, but quality channels that are trying to, the information is there for you to not get attached to the information, and just to go, keep going. You have a long way to go, which is the stillness of you. Know who you are. That's what they will, the most positive channels are going to tell you that. Stop getting distracted with all of this. Go straight into your being. That's what Ra said. Know yourself. You are the creator. To know the creator and to be the creator is to be all that there is, and so on. Whereas the negative ones, the negative influences, will try to persuade you to, obviously, not only go into the philosophy of the negative, but also to create names and to worship them and all of this. And this is where you see these positive entities disguised, or negative entities disguised as positive ones, and the whole shenanigans, right? And so either way, the teaching is the same. Don't get distracted. If you're meditating, you see, great things happening, yeah, okay, let it be. Don't attach to them. That's the thing. Don't attach to anything. You're here to become nothing, to become no one. And by becoming no one is where you become everything. Otherwise, you're still stuck in identity and individuality and me and so on. Okay, so Ra emphasizes that and says, it's through the harmony, the mutual love, and the honest calling for aid from the forces of light, which have given you the shield and buckler to withstand this constant influence or attack on them. Makes a lot of sense to me. So, all right, let's move on. Question 7, Don says, what is the environmental situation of this particular 5th density negative entity, and how does he work with 4th density negative in order to establish power and control? And what is his particular philosophy with respect to himself as creator, and his use for the first distortion, and the extension of this use of the first distortion to the 4th density negative? I hope that this isn't too complex a question. It seems like it's all, complex and convoluted, but let's see what Ra says, and I'll explain it. Okay, well, apparently I have to explain it first, according to my autonomic system. All right, so Don wants to know a couple of things. The environmental situation. Where does he live? How does it look? And how does he work with 4 density negative in order to establish power and control? Okay, so he wants to get a visual of its main quarters, right? And headquarters, I should say. And what is his particular philosophy with respect to himself as creator? That's another thing. If he knows that he is the creator, and how does he use that knowledge? And his use of the first distortion, which is the law of free will, and the extension of this use of the first distortion, free will, to the 4th density negative, which is its own lackeys or companions, or not companions actually, minions is the word. So Don wants to know a lot. What does Ra say? They say the environment of your companion is that of the rock, the cave, the place of barrenness, for this is the density of wisdom. That which is needed may be thought and received. To this entity, very little is necessary upon the physical, if you will, or space-time complex of distortions. So these are sort of metaphors to the environment of negative entities, at least their companion, 5th density negative, because we're talking about rock and cave and the place of barrenness. It's a metaphor. We're not going to find them in caves, of course. It's just that they are isolated, basically. And Ra has talked about this, especially 6th density. Once they graduate to 6th density, they become almost totally isolated. They don't want to deal with anybody. They just want their control and their little illusion that, this is this is what I am. I am God Almighty. Until they eventually realize, if I'm God Almighty, then I'm everything. And if I'm everything, then I'm not separate. Oh, what a fool was I. So yeah, that which is needed may be thought and received. So this is, I guess, the conditions of space-time. Let's get a little metaphysical here. Every existence must have existence in both physical and metaphysical, space-time and time-space. So the existence in space-time is subtler and subtler over time, because they do manifest. And I think this is where we find that dark energy and matter that exists in the universe, where it's unaccountable, we can't measure it, it's there, we know it's there, it's causing an influence, but it's not here. I'm not saying that these are the densities, these are proofs of the densities, but there's something to it. And I mean, they make up more than 96% of the universe. And think about that, 96 or more of the universe is made out of this dark energy and matter. So there's a lot to be said there. In any case, that's where they reside. That's the space-time. Somewhere it has to correlate with our space-time, right, in some way or another. And to me, it's just it's interesting that we cannot see it. We cannot see dark matter or energy, and we can only measure its influence on the expansion of the universe, or the existence of the universe. For us to have a universe, we need to have this energy and this matter, which is not really visible to us. I think dark energy, is way bigger than dark matter. I may be wrong there, but that makes a lot of sense. This energy may correspond to time-space, which is the vast majority, and space-time may be dark matter as we know it. Don't ask me the distinction between the two. I don't know. These are scientists that are way beyond my understanding, but just a speculation there. Okay, to this entity, very little is necessary upon the physical or space-time complex of distortion, because most of their work and life is all in time-space. It's like the one who has dedicated itself to just living, yogis who are always in time-space. This is why I kind of laugh, not in a mockery way, but I kind of laugh at the people who say, oh, they're useless, they are lost, and so on. This is a sort of judgment to yogis and people who have decided to not live in space-time, basically, live most of their lives in meditation. Why is that a problem? Why do people have to judge this? I don't know. Maybe because they have ideals. They have ideals as to how life should be, and you shouldn't be sitting there all day. You should be doing something. I don't know. You're not contributing to reality. If that is what it is, then so be it. So, all right. So that's the premise of the negative entity living in fifth density. Let's see what else does Ross say. They continue and say, such an entity spends its consciousness within the realms of time-space, as I said, in an attempt to learn the ways of wisdom through the utmost use of the powers and resources of the self. Since the self is the creator, the wisdom density provides many informative and fascinating experiences for the negatively polarized entity. In some respects, one may see a more lucid early attachment to wisdom from those of negative polarity, as the nexus of positions of consciousness upon which wisdom is laid is simpler. What? What did you say there? Oh my god. Okay. Let's go little by little, because this is heavy. At least for me it is. Okay, so Ross says, such an entity spends its consciousness within the realms of time-space. That's what I was talking about. Its physical existence is only there to... I think the dynamic, for what I understand in the philosophy of the Confederation within space-time and time-space, there's always space-time and time-space in the creation. There is no such thing as just time-space. There is something the Confederation calls, and I made a video about this in Spanish. I know that I've made it in Spanish, not in English, but I talked about these are all the densities, and there is space-time and time-space. In the Confederation, in subsequent, this was cool, after the raw contact, they explain the structure of this, and they call also pure time-space, which is a clumsy way to talk about pure consciousness, in my opinion, at least in my model. But it is a valuable way to perceive the structure of reality, where this pure time-space is where the creator resides, basically. The one who is creating both space-time and time-space. This is you, the self. And we've had many... it's interesting how all our traditions have, at least the ones that have created a mythology around it, have made this sort of distinction, right? The Gnostics have their own explanation of this. I forget the name that they use. We have the Hindus have talked about this, with Brahman being the absolute, and then I forget if it's not Krishna. My God, I forgot. But there is a deity who is the I'll remember and I'll say it. Who is the personification of Brahman, right? Maybe one of you can help me out. Come on, help a brother out. Type it in the comments, please. Yeah, so that is where was I? Okay, so they spend most of their time in time-space because it's a sort of meditation. Yes, so in the Confederation philosophy, they also say that the time spent in the higher densities is mostly what we call meditation. It's a constant meditation, and there's very little movement in terms of physicality. They gave us a hint about this when Ra talked about, or Don asked a question about traveling to other galaxies and so on, and Ra said, in essence, we just prefer to project our consciousness there as opposed to physically travel there. It's a lot more efficient, and we enjoy it a lot more just to feel the love of. So in essence, all the other densities can be seen as deeper experiences within the self, the cosmic mind, as a sort of manifested self, which needs to be in space-time and time-space. I'm making this a whole class in metaphysical structure based on the law of one, which is not really the intention, but I hope it's making sense. Just I want you to see the whole creation as being made of densities, and these densities are sort of, levels of experience. And within these levels of experience, of course, we can have infinite experiences within them, just like we can have an infinite amount of experiences here in third density as humans, potentially. So it is for the other densities. And that is just the way of the cycle of the creation. All of it exists in potential and different bodies and experiences in them and so on. But we're concerned with human form for now. That's why I don't like to go too deep into the structure of the creation and metaphysics, because we can get awed by all of this, and as I mentioned before, we can get distracted with all of this, and I want to experience fifth density right now. Why am I in this human body? That kind of thing. I like to avoid that. Okay, my tea is almost done, but I am not even 2/3 over with this. Okay, then they say, since the self is the creator, this is a very important part, because they say, since the self is the creator, they're talking about the negative entity, the wisdom density provides many informative and fascinating experiences for the negatively polarized entity. Now, like I said, if you look at your mind, your conscious mind right now, and its structure. You go to the subconscious and the unconscious mind. I'm not asking you to do it, but to be aware that this exists. Then you can see that the complexity of your own mind is quite rich and fascinating. But we don't have access to it, right? Our conscious mind is veiled, and we don't have access to it. So we can have this experience of human form, which we should learn to cherish. And that's my whole idea with everything that I say and do. We need to cherish this experience. It's like no other. I don't think any other experience is as intense as this one. And Ra has emphasized this when they say Catalyst is 100 times more intense here. We want Catalyst. Catalyst is growth. And growth allows a more dense experience for the whole self. So yeah. In any case, if you see your mind being like this, then you know that there are deeper portions that could be explored and experienced, but not in the human form, right? We're limited. And so you would have to spend a lot of time in meditation to just get glimpses of it. But why do that, right? Let's enjoy human form, and then when we die, we see where it goes. We don't know where it goes. We're not in control. We just see what's happening, and depending on how much we use Catalyst here, then experience may be richer and greater in other densities. So why so fascinated with other densities? Enjoy this one. This is where you're at. So okay. The fifth density provides this, they say, many informative and fascinating experiences. I would say to the positive ones, of course, as well, but they're talking about the negative, the polarized here entity. So they say that in some respects, this is another part that is different, but yeah, just get that. For any fifth density entity, positive or negative, there is this richness in experience. Informative, because it's the density of wisdom. And so Ra says, in some respects, one may see a more lucid early attachment to wisdom from those of negative polarity. So here they seem to be talking about not the structure, but the process in which a negative entity becomes aware of wisdom. Okay, this is rather confusing, not confusing, but it's the verbiage here is it's intricate, because they say, in some respects one may see a more lucid early attachment to wisdom from those of the negative polarity. Let's pause it there. This early attachment to wisdom is the bypass that they do with the heart. You see, there is an attachment there to wisdom. And that attachment says, screw the heart, we don't care about it. We're only here for, there is wisdom here. There is information that could be useful. Love, that's not useful. It doesn't help me control others. Remember, the negative entity is first born within the lower energy centers, which have nothing to do with the heart. And so when this illusion is created, and I would say there is a point in which this illusion becomes so real that they move into the wisdom. And I mean, they discern love as being silly or useless, and so they see wisdom as being powerful and strong. So that is what Ra says, the lucid early attachment to wisdom. And they explain that the nexus of position of consciousness, basically how the conscious attention of the negative entity on wisdom, that foundation is simple, is not complex. It's only about, and the way I see it is that as they approach wisdom, they're approaching it from the point of the need for control and manipulation and benefit for themselves. So when you approach reality this way, let's talk about humans in general now here. The human is the one who creates or third density experience as a human. There are other third density experiences, not humans, that of course create this, but you follow me. So these humans, that's how they create the negative entity, right? They separate themselves from reality. When they do that, they know that for them to survive, they need to control and manipulate and follow the path of the left-hand side. When they do that, they do it through wisdom. So they use wisdom. This actually, to me, clarifies one of the questions that we have within the material, which is, well, it doesn't clarify, but there is a question to see if the negative entities use wisdom. I believe they do. So yeah, I think that's what they do, and this can all be summarized to say that it's a very simple foundation they use for wisdom in the negative entity, because they're using it for control and manipulation, whereas wisdom in the positive side is a function of love. In other words, the positive side creates love first, and then wisdom shines as love. So it's a constant refinement of wisdom, let's call it that. It's a constant refinement based on the amount of love that can be used, or can be, it's not used because you're not using it, can be allowed, can be, what's the word? Implemented, allowed is the best word that I can use right now. So that's the dynamic of the negative entity using wisdom. Okay, my tea is done. Now I can move on. Guess what? With another part of this question or answer. So all right, this is the final part where Ra says, the relationship of such an entity to fourth density negative entities is one of the more powerful and the less powerful. The negative path posits slavery of the less powerful as a means of learning the desire to serve the self, to the extent that the will is brought to bear. It is in this way that polarity is increased in the negative sense. Thus, fourth density entities are willing slaves of such a fifth density entity, there being no doubt whatsoever of the relative power of each other. So this is a cute description of what we see in our societal structures now. I talked about this, and we can see it politically, militarily, is that even a word? And religiously, of course. All of these are power structures. And Ra will talk about this. Maybe we will get to that, and if not, I think the next question will cover that part. But yeah, so Ra is describing here the structure of four density negatives. I correct myself, of negative entities, or the negative structure, let's call it that. The relationship of such an entity, fifth density, to fourth density entities is of the more powerful and the less powerful. So I am more powerful and you are less. You see the difference here? Ra has never said, we know more than you, we have this knowledge and we're more powerful than you, or any other positive entity. That's how you discern them, because they're basically telling you, I am you. you are the same as I am. We're both equal, no matter what kind of verbiage or knowledge we have. You see, and this is the kind of attitude that is developed when you see yourself truly for who you are, and you see, oh yeah, whatever is happening at the level of mind, it's a game. It's not really true. Meaning that it doesn't have an existence on its own. It doesn't have any quality that is higher or lower. It's just a game. Much like anything that you see on the screen, it's a game of colors, pixels, shining and moving. Well, they're not moving, they're changing colors. And that's it. We cannot say that, one image is better than the other. They're not. They're all, colors. It's simple as that. 3 colors. Vibrating and modulating themselves to create the illusion of something. That's the mind. So if you know yourself deeply, you know that, oh, okay, essentially everything is just me. When you get in touch with that, you're not involved in labeling and qualification and descriptions of each and one of us and so on. That is true power, to know that what you are is everything, or everything is you, or the you-ness that you are is the basis of everything. So why worry about the things that are happening? But all right. What do they do? The negative path posits slavery. We kind of know this. The less powerful are enslaved, and this is a way. Okay, so this is a question that I actually talked to with Gary. So I don't think you're listening to this, Gary Bean from L&L Research. I didn't understand this. What do they mean by the extent that the will is brought to bear? And he explained it to me. In essence, this part of the paragraph, they're talking about how the negative path wants to manipulate others to activate the will in themselves to seek the negative path. See, that's the kind of control. That's how they get the most polarity, negative polarity. You can see this in structures. If I can convince you to work for me in my pyramid scheme, then I become more powerful. I'm manipulating you. And so I'm telling you in my pyramid scheme or cult that, the more you do this, the more you're going to advance. And you can do this by manipulating others. So I'm teaching you the ways of manipulation, and so you grow, I grow, and the other ones are manipulated. But you see, you can help them also to become more powerful because you teach them how to manipulate others, and so the structure grows. That is exactly what happens metaphysically in the realm of the influences of the negative. It is in this way that polarity is increased in the negative sense, Ra says. Thus, fourth density entities are willing slaves of such a fifth density entity. Willing slaves. See, that's quite different to be a victim. Oh, I'm a victim of all the negative in the world and all the things that are happening. You are swimming in the sinkhole of indifference if you're thinking that way, my friend, and you must be shaken out of that confusion. You're not a victim. You are unconsciously, I will say that, unconsciously believing that of yourself. So wake up. And so for the negative ones to be polarized, you need to be willing to do it. So that's why in the negative side, that's what they want. They want to manipulate you to the point in which you say, yes, this pyramid scheme is the game to play. I have been exposed to some of these, not by direct approach, but by other people that have told me how they have approached them to become part of this pyramid schemes that are all over the place. It's just another mini game in this macro play of the world. So the four density entities are willing slaves, and there being no doubt whatsoever of the relative power of each. Again, in a pyramid scheme, the guy who has, and this is how they do it too. They have big rings and jewelry, and they have cars and suits and all of this, and they're saying this is what you will get. If you continue on this path, go sell this, go sell our bogus product. It's just how it works. But okay, let's move to the next question. Probably cover one or two more. Don says, a reflection of this could be seen in our density in many of those leaders that instigate war and have followers who support, in total conviction that direction of conquest is correct. Is this correct? Ross says, any organization which demands obedience without question upon the basis of relative power is functioning according to the above described plan. I want to give a little bit of a personal anecdote here, or just a confession of myself. I used to be, what would be the word? I used to despise the military organization, and in my ignorance, I used to label all military personnel as being dumb and stupid because they followed obvious leaders that just wanted to, they're not liberating anything. All they're concerned with is their pockets and their power. not really liberating people or doing whatever it is. And this, I mean, it's globally known as the U.S. attitude, right? But this goes everywhere. You know, every other country has done this. Especially in the past, it used to be a lot more blatant. At least in the past, it used to be, you know, out there and said, "We're here to conquer. You know, we're here to dominate you. We're not going to fool around. We're pretty honest." Now it's a little bit more disguised into, you know, freedom and so much. But I used to despise this military approach. Now, this is 1981. We've had a lot of this already, of course, and Don was not unaware of it. But I like that Ra doesn't say, "Yes, you are right, the military." And now I have changed, of course, my view on all of this, because I see that the vast majority of the people in the military are actually good-hearted people, and all they want to do is help. You know, they want to you know, they believe in this, and so they're manipulated, but I don't think they're doing it. And I would say the vast majority of them are not doing it because they really believe in this, and they're willingly, you know, trying to go up the ladder and become conquerors or whatnot. Especially the military structure, it's not made for that. But those at the top, at the very top of it, of course, are using this as a body for their own purposes. So I would say that the more the ones on top polarize, the less there is possibility for the ones at the bottom to do so. Maybe for other incarnations, who knows? But yeah, that's just my view. I don't think the vast majority. Let's look about religious systems. Do you think the guy at the church who is, you know, at some point part of the network of the Pope and the Vatican and so on, even within the Vatican, you think they're all there to manipulate and control and become negatives? Chances are not. Maybe not even the Pope. So, you know, let's give the benefit of the doubt to everybody and know that, yeah, you know, whoever's benefiting from this, I mean, yeah, they all could be polarizing negatively at some point. But I don't know. I simply don't know. I just know that what Ra said is the most important part. Any organization which demands obedience without question upon the basis of relative power is functioning according to the above described plan, which is to empower those on top. So how does individual humans partake into this? I don't know. But the structure is there, of course. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that I used to point fingers in the past. I'm not so clear now as to even if that's even possible. We don't know. We just know that the structure is there. We must become aware of the structure, not so much of the entities or the people. That's my opinion. And we do like in this world to point fingers and say, you know, this guy and this girl and this and that, and they're doing all of this. Okay, look beyond that. Look beyond the facade. Look beyond that, and you'll gain more much knowledge and less fear. Let's see if I can cover one more. Is this a long question? What is wrong? No, let's cover one more, and yeah, we're gonna continue this in the next part. But let's see what else does Don have. Question 9. Don says, one point that I'm not clear on let me repeat that. One point that I'm not clear on is the understanding and use of the first distortion by fifth and fourth density negative entities in manipulating third density entities. I would like to know how the first distortion affects the attempts to carry out the conquest of third density entities and the attempt to add them, through or under the premise of the first distortion, to their social memory complexes. Would you expand that, please? And Ra says, this latter plan is not one of which four density negative social memory complexes are capable. The fourth density habit is of offering temptations and of energizing pre-existing distortions. Four density entities lack the subtlety and magical practice which the fifth density experience offers. This is actually pretty interesting, because Ra is, for what I can understand, four density is not properly manipulating. To a degree they are, by offering temptations, but the capacity to control and use free will or distort free will of other willing entities is not proper of fourth density, but of fifth density, right? Because Don is asking about the conquest of third density entities and to add them to the structure under the premise of the first distortion. Now, let me say that Don is trying to ask a question here that it's going to take a long time, so I'm just going to repeat it next time. But he's trying to get into understanding basically how the first distortion plays a part in this, because they're being controlled, they're being manipulated, and so we'll get to that in the next part. But just so you know, that's what Don wanted to learn. But Ra is saying here that, and I think this is quite insightful, that fourth density negative social memory complexes are not capable of doing this. They're only capable of offering temptations and energizing pre-existing conditions or distortions. What does this mean? If you have certain distortions towards negativity, then they will enhance that. That's their point. It's influencing the negative that is existing in you. Also offering temptation. So if you have not made your mind, and you're there, you just don't know, what do I want to do? Well, those temptations are going to be there. So power, money, people under your supervision, and you becoming more powerful and so on. These are the temptations. It's thoughts, influences in your mind to become more and more powerful. It's very simple. It's not complicated. And then they say that the four density entities lacked magical practice, subtlety and magical practice that the fifth density experiences and offers, of course. You know what? Because the next question is actually... No, we'll leave it for next time, and we'll carry over this attempt of Don wanting to know a lot more about the use of free will. Conclusions. I kind of like talking about the negative path because it enlightens a little bit more this gameplay of positive and negative influences in your mind. Now, while I know that most of us are not at all at risk or interested or I would say, I don't want to use the word victim, but receivers of these negative temptations to the degree of wanting to polarize negatively, much less influenced by fifth density negative entities. I would say that, however, there are things in our minds that are confused, that may be mistaken for negative thought patterns and so on. I think this is the struggle of the positive entity that still is confused because of the perceptions of its life experience. And so there is this view of the self as being unworthy, less than, insufficient, incomplete. And these are not negative in the sense of polarization. This is a suppression of your own beauty, of your own love, of who you truly are, the expression, let me put it this way, the expression of oneness is having through you. Okay, it's a doubt, it's a confusion, that's what I would call it. And so these doubts that exist in our mind, they can be eroded easily by just becoming aware of them. So that would be my suggestion. Even if there are temptations, if you may see that there are temptations that you might associate with this first part that we talked about, the negative entities, just become aware of them. See what they mean. What are they? And that's the whole practice, really. Everything else is it's a unnecessary complication of this, but a welcome one sometimes for some people, so I won't deter you from going through them. Whatever that may be, affirmations or visualization and calling upon help and so on. All of these things are valuable things too. So it really is up to you. But the key thing that holds everything is the awareness, the knowledge, the knowing of whatever is happening, without the need to control it or to change it or to want to manipulate it for some reason or another. So that's all I got today. We're going to continue this conversation in the next part as we talk more about the negative entities, and I think eventually we're going to get into are we going to get into the tarot? I'm not sure. We'll see. But with that being said, that's all I have. Thank you for listening and watching as usual. And I have nothing else to say, but I'll see you in part 2 of session 87.